Hello, this is Howard from DSPIRA, and now we're finishing up the LNA. We have now the actual connectors to solder in. They're actually relatively straightforward. And so I have one in place, but they're actually obviously not soldered in yet. So you can see that in this case the input to the LNA is going to be at X1. So I'm just going to set it up poking through the holes, and then the output of the LNA, sorry, the input of the LNA is at X1 and the output is at X2. And I notice that I put the prongs from the connectors pointing up through the LNA, or the board for the LNA. This one definitely have to put it this way. This one you can actually flip it the other way too if you like, but I prefer putting both of them on the same side, the soldering on the same side. That's just my preference. But you could do it the other one. This one flip the other way. Alright, so I tend to like that because it gives you a level soldering platform. What I also like to do is actually put a little bit of tape on one end across the board to sort of hold it in place. At this point you don't have to worry about heating and melting the tape or anything like that. This sort of makes it a little more stable when you solder the points. So when you push on this, it doesn't tip over. Alright, so you can pretty much solder any of the pins first. I tend to like to do the middle pin. Gotta be a little bit careful not to put so much solder on that you overflow that little ring and then touch that capacitor. You don't want to do that. It might take a little while to heat up because the heat will transfer to the connector itself. But make sure you're touching both the connector and the circle. As you can see, you'll get a nice round blob if you do it right. And voila, that's done. So now all that's left now is to do the other four on this side. Not quite there yet. These are probably the larger heat sinks than the middle one. Do have to be a little patient. And voila. There you go. The reason why these are going a little easier on the first one is because I pretty much heated up the whole connector below the board. So alright, so again, if it doesn't quite get to the bottom, I'm going to come back with a heat gun and that'll make a very nice connection. So I'll demonstrate that now. So all I have to really do is hold it over these 5 prongs, and the heat will basically get the board and the connector is all hot. Again, be careful not to knock the board, because the capacitors and resistors nearby will also, the solder will also heat up. And you should get a nice seal around those circles. And that should do it. As you can see, I moved the LNA to the connector side, X2, so you get a better view. And now we're going to basically repeat something similar, which again, I tend to like to do the center one first. And this will probably go a little faster than the other four because again, I'm not heating up as much of the connector. Again, you want to make sure you're touching both the copper ring and the post coming up. You definitely want a good connection. A little more would be nice. And that should do it. Good. So again, I'm going to try to heat these other ones up. It's going to take a little while because I'm heating up the whole connector. What's nice about this connector, there are no components to worry about, so you can pretty much be right next to it and not lean over too much. Again, you can see it's not quite hot yet, but okay, again, they can look a little ugly, that's okay. We'll come back with the heat gun and melt it all in place. Alright, so now I'll take the heat gun again and heat up to connect the 5 pins, and they will flow and then make a nice seal and connection between the ground on the LNA on the board and the pins on the connector. Again, we're not next to any components, so we don't have to worry as much about heating up the solder near the components. Well, there we go. There they go. Forms a nice connection. Very good. And there you have it. As you can see, the heat gun has nicely melted the solder, so it formed a nice contact with the copper ground on the LNA board. But there's one last thing you still have to do, and that is actually as a ring of solder around the connection point between this part and this part. In the past, we had some pop out. Doesn't mean that they all will pop out, but it's an easy enough thing to do that you should do it. So I'm going to tape down the board. I flipped it over. You can see. And it's a relatively straightforward thing to do. You place your soldering iron on the bottom side of the connector. Right there. Make sure you pushed up against both this side and that side. And once it heats up, and you're kind of pushing up a little bit, not too hard because you don't want to lift off the table. And then you just basically keep putting the solder here until it basically melts and forms a ring around the connection. But we'll do it. It takes a little while because you're basically heating the whole darn connector at this point. So obviously it's going to get pretty hot. Again, the board does get hot too, so you gotta be a little careful not to touch the board either. Alright, so you can see it's running a bead of solder all the way around, and that should do it. Let me give you a little bit more. And that should do it. Alright, and you just take it away, and voila! You form a little solder that seals it pretty well. So again, the last step is actually to put the cover on the other side, but we'll demonstrate that in another video.